All right, so this is going to surprise some of you, but 99% of the time you're fighting with your wife, you're not fighting about what you think you're fighting about. It's not the dishes, it's not the budget, it's not about the bedtime routine. These are just symptoms. The real fight, the one that keeps blowing up your home, comes from something deeper, something predictable, something you can fix. And after helping thousands of men through my podcast and through my coaching, and after walking through 10 years of marriage myself, I've created something called the 5 Firestarters. And these are the real root causes behind almost every argument in your marriage. And once you finally understand these 5 things, everything is going to change for you. Your fights will finally make sense. The cycles will stop repeating, and your home will stop feeling like a war zone. So if you are tired of having the same conflict on repeat, the same cycles, stay with me. Because today I'm going to break down the 5 fire starters, the hidden forces that ignite almost every single fight, and exactly how to put out the fire before it burns your marriage down. Now let's get into it. Welcome to the Dad Nation podcast, the place where high-performing men are empowered to reclaim their home, their health, and their happiness while enhancing their career success. You see, in a world full of noise, burnout, and mediocrity, we believe what's missing is courageous and compassionate leadership in the home, because when the dad gets better, the whole family wins. You see, this isn't just a podcast. It's a movement of men who refuse to settle for less in our families, our focus, and our future. We are curse breakers and we are legacy makers. And I'm your host, Mitchell Osmond, and I'm honored that you have chosen to invest your most valuable asset, which is your time with me today. Now let's get into it. All right, welcome, my friend. Whether you're tuning in from on this continent, the U.S., Canada, or in the UK. I was just talking to a guy a little while ago on Instagram who was tuning in from Korea. So we got guys all over the world, and wherever you're tuning in from, I just want to say thank you. And I promise that this is going to be a powerful conversation. If you are a man, and actually if you're a woman and you're listening and you're in a long-term relationship or you're married, this is going to turn on so many light bulbs for you. Okay, because I want to start with a mindset shift or a belief shift that's going to change your marriage if you let it. Okay, and it's this: fights are feedback. Okay, most men think that fights mean something is wrong, that the marriage is broken, or you think, oh, here we go again, she's upset. But listen, conflict isn't a sign of failure. Conflict is a sign of friction, right? And friction means there's something deeper is rubbing underneath the surface. Fighting can be feedback if you let it. Right? Here's an analogy I want you to think about, all right, when we think about fighting. Unmanaged conflict is like a wildfire. It's destructive. It's unpredictable. It's out of control. It damages a lot, right? A lot of loss. But managed conflict is like a controlled burn. And if you know what that is, a controlled burn is purposeful. It's healthy. It's actually necessary for growth. You see, one destroys and one strengthens. And I want to teach you how to create those controlled burns today. Because the 2 most common failures men fall into are 1, avoiding or shutting down, right, which builds pressure and emotional distance, or 2, blowing up, which breaks trust and breaks down emotional safety. And here's the thing: neither of those work. Neither creates connection. And 90% of the time, the real issue is not the issue. It's the fight behind the fight, okay? And today, you're going to finally understand that deeper battle. But a quick note, before we jump in and go any deeper, I want to tell you about an insanely practical tool to build connection before conflict even happens. And I just released it, and it's called the Spark Starter Kit. And guys tell me all the time, it's like having me as a coach in their pocket. It's for busy guys who have the best intentions but can never seem to find the time to plan great dates, or the time to think about how to respond the right way, or ruminating over a text message to get it right, to say the right thing. Here's the thing: now you don't have to, because the Spark Starter Kit is your romance on autopilot for an entire year. Okay. Inside this kit, you're going to get 365 Spark text templates. All right. These are pre-written text messages, so you can say the right thing every day without ever overthinking. And there's text for every situation. There's 52 plug-and-play date-night blueprints. That's one powerful date night per week, already planned for you. All you've got to do is show up and be the hero. You've got 100 Spark Starter questions, which are conversational prompts that are designed to rebuild intimacy fast with your wife. And the last part, which is my favorite, it's a 3-part romance reset mini course, so you can rebuild connection, restore polarity, and reignite desire. And also, it's built in this living document that as I add more modules and add more things to it, if you buy this, you're going to get lifetime access to it and get all the future updates. And I tell you what, it's cheaper than a bouquet of flowers that, let's be real, are going to die in a week. All right. Put your romance on autopilot for an entire year. I think right now it's $17. I mean, it's going to get way more expensive than that as time goes. But if you want to get this, go to sparkstarterkit.com, or you can grab the link to it in the show notes below. So let me be real with you, man, because if you're a longtime listener of the show, you would know this. Me and my wife fought constantly in the first few years of our marriage. And it wasn't the small stuff. It was confusing. It was painful. It was discouraging. It was tough conflict. And I remember journaling, writing my journal, asking God, like, why did you let me marry her? Did I mess this up? Did I get everything wrong? Did I hear you wrong? Why am I in such a miserable marriage? I mean, these were raw, real questions I was asking. I felt hopeless. This was one of the darkest seasons in my life. And if you're there right now, if you're feeling stuck, if you're feeling trapped, if you're feeling confused, then I'm glad you're here, because you are in the right place. Because everything I'm about to teach you took me years of pain, of reflection, of prayer, of observation, and ownership to figure it out. I'm giving it to you in one episode. So buckle up, hold on tight, all right? And here's the thing. If you're thinking, I don't like the sound of this, I'm probably not going to be able to get this. Listen, if I can learn this, so can you, okay? So let's get into it. The 5 fire starters. These are the real causes of conflict that are happening underneath the surface. All right, here's the first one. Love and respect. Here's the reality. Men crave respect far more than they crave love. Women crave love more than anything else. They want to be cherished, right? And this isn't a cliche. This is backed by research, right? Dr. Emerson Eggerichs, who studied over 7,000 couples, found that when a man feels disrespected, he reacts in ways that feel unloving. And when a woman feels unloved, she reacts in a way that feels disrespectful. And this creates a deadly cycle, and he calls it the crazy cycle, right? So for an example, me and my relationship with my wife, when we first got married, I was working 3 part-time jobs. I was grinding, trying my best to provide, and she felt unloved because I was never home. I was always working. Now, when I would come home, I felt disrespected because she didn't understand or appreciate, or it was perceived that way, as why I was working so hard. So guess what we did? I stayed at work where I felt respected, got that need met, and she hung out with her friends where she felt more loved and got that need met. We were both getting our needs met elsewhere. And guess what happened to the marriage? We drifted, right? We drifted further and further away. And we get caught in that cycle. So friend, my question to you is, can you see that pattern in your marriage? If you're listening, you're like, yeah, I'm actually way more comfortable at work because I'm respected there. I'm admired there. I know what to do or say there. Then that might be something that you want to pay attention to. Okay. The second fire starter is this idea of family of origins. So here's the reality. Every man and every woman brings their old home into their new home. Your conflict style is almost always inherited, not chosen. It wasn't intentional, right? Intentionally chosen by you. It was written by your family, by your parents, right? So for example, my wife's family handled conflict with softness, with presence, with warmth. My family, we kind of backed away, cooled off, separated, avoided emotion. We didn't really get into the deeper levels of emotion, right? So in marriage, when we'd have conflict, she would reach in for closeness and I would retreat for space, right? There was this instant emotional mismatch. And here's the thing. It happens on a subconscious level. These are deep-rooted expectations of how a man should respond, like that's how our wives see it, or how we see a woman should respond, because this is what was modeled for me. And so, for example, if in your situation, look at your wife's family. How do they handle conflict? Look at your wife's father. How does he handle conflict? How does he show up in those situations when the family needs him? How does he respond under pressure? And if it's very different than the way you do, this is probably causing a tension in the mind of your wife, right? Because she's been raised to think this is the way the masculine responds, right? It's a deep embedded expectation. So if that sounds like you might want to ask yourself, what did conflict look like in your house growing up? What did conflict look like in her house growing up? And where might our family of origins be clashing? Does that make sense? Okay, third fire starter is a clash of core values. This is a huge one, okay? Your core values are what determine how you see the world you live in. Your core values determine what you believe is right or wrong, right? So it's very important to understand your core values because there's a high likelihood that your wife has a totally different set of core values. And so when we do something that rubs our core values the wrong way or goes against them, then that cuts deep, right? Much deeper than anything else. So classic example, my wife values relationships, connection, community. I value security, finances, responsibility, right? Which is pretty common stereotypical for men versus women. But here's what happened. Early in our marriage, when she started working, she blew off a shift to support her friend who was going through a breakup, right? And she was a casual at the time. And remember, I was working pretty hard to make ends meet. I was like so confused, so frustrated because I couldn't understand why she would not work when we needed the money. And I felt disrespected because of all the work that I was doing. But here's the thing. She wasn't trying to disrespect me. She was just acting from her values. And I can remember, thinking, man, for the life of me, I can't understand why she would risk our finances because of a heartbroken friend. Now, simultaneously, she was looking at me and thinking, what kind of cold-hearted person values money over people? And here's the thing. Both are legitimate questions. Both are legitimate responses. But knowing your core values and your wife's core values are huge game changers because they allow you to see and understand from the other's perspective. And when you see clearly, you can diagnose the fight beneath the fight more clearly. The one thing that saved us in those first 2 or 3 years of marriage was understanding our shared value. And this was huge because our shared value was faith. We believed in God, right? We believed that He had a plan for our lives. And so no matter how hard things got, we both believed that God brought us together for a divine reason and that there was some bigger purpose for all of this, even if it didn't make sense in the moment. That we believed that God had a plan for our marriage and a plan to use all of this conflict for good. Now, flash forward 10 years and here we are. I'm teaching you about it today and helping you improve your marriage. So it turns out that He did have a plan to turn that trash into treasure. And as I was writing some notes for this podcast, it was actually the first time I had put these pieces together. And what a cool way to reflect and look back at His plan and see it come to fruition. Because the Mitchell 10 years ago was so confused. The Mitchell today can very clearly see a purpose in it all. So if this sounds like this might be you, and you might be having a clash with your wife, a question you might want to ask yourself is, which value are you protecting in your conflict? Where do you see the clashes in your core values? And alternatively, where do you see an overlap in your core values that can actually make you stronger? And if you've never done this before, I would just go online and Google like how to do a core values test and get your wife to do it as well. There's a million free ones, and you can compare them side by side and see where some could cause tension and there might be some overlap. This information is so critical to help you understand where this conflict is coming from. Okay? Now let's move on to Firestarter number 4, our attachment styles. And now before I get into the 4 different types of attachment styles, let me break it down for you so you'll understand what exactly they are. You see, attachment styles describe how we connect with and we respond to others in relationships, especially when it comes to closeness, trust, and conflict. They're basically our emotional blueprint, if you will, and it's shaped by early experiences that influences how safe or unsafe we feel in our relationships, right? And we develop them, like I just said, from a very early age. We develop our attachment styles mostly from how we experienced love, safety, and comfort growing up. The way our parents or our caregivers responded to our needs, whether they were warm, consistent, or distant, and unpredictable, or even unsafe, taught our brains what to expect from relationships. So if love felt reliable, we learned to trust it. But if it felt inconsistent or conditional, we learned to cling to avoid, or on the flip side, to fear it. And so over time, these early patterns became our default setting for how we connect with others until we become aware of them and choose to rewrite the script. Okay, so there's 4 different styles. Okay, number 1 is a secure attachment. Everyone wants to have a secure attachment style, all right? And here's what they're like. People with a secure attachment style are generally confident in themselves and confident in their relationships. They're comfortable getting close, but they're also comfortable giving space. They communicate openly. They handle conflict without blowing up or shutting down. And they trust that love doesn't mean losing independence. So a person with a secure attachment style, they can express their needs clearly and listen to their other partner's needs without getting defensive. They don't panic when things feel off. They believe problems can be worked through. They create a sense of calm and safety for their partner. Now that's the secure attachment style. And hey, before I move on, I want you to tune in and listen. Ask yourself, which attachment style am I, and which attachment style might my wife be? Okay? Everyone wants to be secure. A very small percentage of us in the world are actually secure. And I'll tell you a little bit more about mine at the end. The second attachment style is an anxious attachment style. These people crave closeness and reassurance. They love deeply, but they often worry that the other person might be pulling away or that they might stop caring. You see, their emotions can swing fast. One minute they feel connected, and the next minute they feel insecure as if something is off. So here's how it shows up in relationships. They might text or call a lot to feel connected, right? This is the wife who's, if you didn't respond in a couple hours, she's getting worried. She's sending you more text messages following up. They take small changes, like I said, like a delayed reply, very personally. They often fear that they might be too much, or they might fear being left by their partner. And their biggest need is consistent reassurance and security, okay? The third attachment style is called the avoidant attachment. And here's what they're like. Avoidantly attached people value independence and control. They often seem either calm or detached, but it's usually because closeness actually feels uncomfortable for them, because they fear losing themselves in relationships. So they keep emotional distance to feel safe. So here's how someone with an avoidant attachment style shows up in a relationship. They may shut down or pull away during emotional conversations. They often minimize problems or feelings. They value their space and their alone time. And their biggest need is usually freedom and emotional safety without pressure. Now, the fourth one is actually a mix of 2 and 3, and it's called disorganized or fearful avoidant attachment. Now, these people are hot and cold. Okay, they want closeness, but they also fear it. Often because they've experienced inconsistent or painful relationships in the past. So they might reach out for connection and then suddenly pull away. And so in relationships, a disorganized attachment style person might seem completely unpredictable, warm one minute, distant the next. They often struggle with trust. They want love, but they also simultaneously fear getting hurt. And their biggest need is healing, safety, and stability. So you can think about it this way. The person with a secure attachment style says, I'm okay and you're okay. The person with the anxious attachment style says, I'm not okay unless you're close. The person with an avoidant attachment style says, I'm okay as long as you don't get too close. And then the person with a disorganized attachment style says, I want closeness, but I also don't trust that it's safe. And some of you are listening and you might be married to number 4, right? The disorganized. And you're thinking, bro, I never know which version of her I'm coming home to. And you know what, man? She's probably thinking the exact same thing about you if you're listening. The anxious avoidance cycle is most common in marriage, okay? Because what happens is one person has an anxious attachment style, the other person has an avoidant attachment style. So what happens is the anxious partner reaches out to feel safe, and then the avoidant partner pulls back to feel safe. And what happens is they both end up feeling misunderstood. You see, this isn't personal, it's neurological. It's 2 nervous systems protecting themselves. This is a very common part of marriage. I have an avoidant attachment style. My wife has an anxious attachment style, and that's exactly our pattern. And so understanding this can be so helpful because we can respond differently. We can overwrite that wiring, okay? So if that might sound like you, a good question that you might want to ask yourself is, do you see that push-pull dynamic in your marriage? Very good question to ask. Think about that. And really, when you see the attachment styles coming out, is usually in the context of conflict. Okay, we're talking about your emotions when things get a little heated. Okay, the 5th fire starter is love languages. Okay, a clash of love languages. Ah, yes, the famous love languages. But here's the thing. Not knowing these is literally like speaking English to someone who only speaks Italian and then getting mad when they don't understand you. You give love in your language and she receives love in hers. And if you're listening to this and you're like, what the heck are you talking about? Well, there's a book called The Love Languages by Dr. Gary Chapman. It's one of the most popular relationship books ever written. But the real quick summary for you. There are 5 love languages that we know about. Number 1 is words of affirmation. Number 2 is physical touch. Number 3 is acts of service. Number 4 is gifts. And number 5 is quality time. Okay, so for example, you might come home and you might help around the house because your love language might be acts of service. And you might think you're doing a great job and you might think you're loving your wife, but she still feels empty and she's not happy. And you're thinking, well, I helped you. I did the laundry. I swept the floor. Why aren't you happy? But maybe her love language is physical touch. And you may have done the laundry. You may have done all that stuff, but you didn't touch her once. What she needs is physical touch, if that is the case. And this is simply a mismatch. You're giving love in your language, not in hers. And the reality is, if you're not loving her in a way that she can receive or understand, you're not loving her, period. It is what it is. This happened with me and my wife. And again, if you're a listener to the show, you would have heard me share this a couple different times. But early on in our marriage, it was like 5 days, maybe 2, 3, 4 days after our honeymoon. I got up. So again, my love language is words of affirmation and acts of service. My wife's love language is physical touch and quality time. I got up early in the morning and I said to myself, I'm going to get up and I'm going to make her breakfast. I'm going to be the best husband, Husband of the Year award. Here we go. Got up, cut up all the fruit, got our yogurt, made all the stuff, pancakes, you name it. And I brought it in on a tray, woke her up gently. Hey, honey, here's breakfast. And I was like, I'm going to go out and get my own. And so I went out and started making my breakfast. When I came back in 10 minutes later, the breakfast was still sitting on the end table and she was scrolling her phone. And I was like pissed because I was like, how in the world, like why, how could she just sit there and not eat the breakfast that I made for her? No, she doesn't really care about acts of service. It's not her thing. She wants quality time. She wants physical touch. So you know what the better thing would have been for me to do is to not get up, not make breakfast, is actually to lay in bed, stay there, spend some quality time with her, maybe rub her back, hold her hand, snuggle, whatever. That would have been so much more effective. And so one thing that could have brought us together ended up tearing us apart and causing a fight, simply because we didn't understand our love language. So if this sounds familiar to you, a question you might want to ask yourself is, are you loving her in your language, or are you loving her in hers? And after hearing this, you might want to ask yourself, what are your wife's love languages? If you don't know, you can do a test online. Just Google it. Free love languages test. All right, you do it for you, and you do it for her, or get her to do it for her. Do you ever get caught loving her in your love language and then getting frustrated when she doesn't appreciate it? Right? Happens to me, and it probably happens to you. And here's where it backfires for a lot of guys. A lot of guys have physical touch, right, for their love language. And so if we're physical touch, we get up the courage to put a move on her, right? We do something kind of dumb. Maybe it's like you groping her while she's washing the dishes or something, and she shuts you down because she's going to. But then you feel rejected. But here's the thing. It's your love language that's getting rejected, not hers. But what happens is it causes conflict. This is a fool's game. If you play this game, you're going to lose every time. I lost and lost and lost for years until I realized this. Okay, now that you understand the 5 fire starters, the fights beneath the fights, I'm going to give you something called the fight formula. And this is your playbook for approaching and resolving conflict. Because now you got the fire starters, you understand what caused it. Now this is how you're going to approach it, deal with it, okay? Hey, can I ask you something real quick? If this show has helped you out in any way, if you've gotten any value, clarity, or even just one gut check moment that's made you a better man, husband, or father, would you take 60 seconds and leave us an honest rating or review? And if you're watching on YouTube, make sure to subscribe to our channel so you never miss a drop. And if you really want to pay it forward, share this episode with a friend. Why? Because we know that there are millions of men out there silently struggling in their marriage, in their health, and in their mindset. Men who maybe were where you were just a few steps ago, feeling tired, stuck, and searching for answers. Finding this podcast might be the thing that changes everything for them. So thank you for being part of this movement and for helping more men become the husbands and fathers their families so desperately need. Now let's get back to the show. The reason why it's called the fight formula is because every letter of the word fight stands for a step, F-I-G-H-T. So the first step is F, which stands for face it. And here's a key point. Conflict is feedback about unmet needs. Remember, I said that in the beginning of the podcast. That this tension is telling you something. What is it telling you? Don't run away from it. Don't stonewall. Don't shut it down. Face it. So many men walk away and they ignore it and they hope it goes away. This is not a good move because you can't fix what you won't face. The second phase to this is identify it. Now that you have the fire starters, you're going to ask yourself, what could be causing this conflict? Where could this clash or conflict be coming from? Is it a clash of love and respect? You feel like you're being disrespected or she feels unloved? Or you get caught in that crazy cycle? Number 2, is it a family of origins challenge, right? Is there some deep-rooted, uncommunicated expectation that's not being met? Look deep into your past and her past. Is it a clash of core values? Could there be something that's going on that's rubbing you the wrong way or hers? Do we have different attachment styles? Is she needing me to lean in or give her space? What am I needing? Do I need to lean in or do I need to take some space? And lastly, the love language. Ask yourself, is there a love language that's not being met? What does it look like to love her in her language, right? So you're going to use those fire starters to identify the conflict. The third step is G, which is ground it. Now, this is where you ground yourself emotionally. Okay, you're not doing this real time with her. This is you're taking space. And I love this analogy. I've shared this before. I've loved this analogy that the Buddhists use about mindfulness, practicing mindfulness and keeping your cool. They say strong emotions are like a rushing waterfall. Most men stand in the torrent. They get caught in the current. But emotional mastery is actually stepping behind the waterfall and being able to observe the current without getting thrown around. You ever stand behind a waterfall? It's incredible. The massive amount of water, thousands upon thousands of liters are dropping per second, and you don't get hit by it. You don't get pushed around. You just get to watch it. And that's the way, as men, we can elevate our minds and we can allow our anger, our frustration to inform us on how to decide or how to respond, but we don't get stuck in the current and get pushed around by our emotions. So here's the thing. Awareness, and that's what we're talking about, breaks autopilot, because your autopilot is probably to snap or to shut down or to stonewall. But that's actually what got you here, right? So we need to break that cycle. So when we're talking about ground it, you are going to take 28 minutes of distance, right? The reason why is we know 14 minutes. You've heard me say this before. It takes 14 minutes on average for the prefrontal cortex to come back online. And then you're going to practice the 4-7-8 breathing method. Inhale for 4 seconds. Hold for 7. Exhale for 8. Do that 3 times slowly. After you've done your breathing exercises, I want you to think about how you can flip these fire starters to become peacemakers. Because that's the thing. You can flip the script. And what caused the fire now becomes something that starts peace with you. Love and respect. Ask yourself a question. What does it look like to be loving to her right now in a way she can respect? In your reflection time while you're grounding yourself in the context of family of origin, you could ask yourself, what is she craving from me historically? It sounds silly, but you might even ask, how would her dad respond? High chances, high probability, if she had a great relationship with her dad, then that could work, right? What did her family do? This is going to be a quick pathway to peace. Number 3, considering your core values. What are her core values? What's most important to her? And how can I validate or come into alignment with that? For attachment styles, again, flip the script. What does her emotional blueprint say I should do? Right? If she's anxious, then I probably need to lean in. If she's avoidant, I need to lean back and give her space. And in the context of the love languages questions, very similar to number 1. What does it look like to love her through this in a way that she can instantly receive? And another question you can ask is this about right now or about back then? Because there's a high probability that it's about something back then, okay? It's not about now. Is this about her words or my wounds? That's another question you can ask. Because again, it's usually not about her words. It might be some insecurity that you have or some fear that you have, a wound that maybe you didn't get healed and now is being triggered. Another question you can ask yourself is, do I want to be right or do I want peace in my home? Now, you can choose being right over peace a few times, but eventually you do that enough time, your marriage is going to be over, okay? So my friend, listen, choose peace. The 4th step in the 5 formula is H, heal it. Here's where you're going to come back, right? After you've reflected, after you've observed the fire starters and you've turned them into peacemakers and you made your plan, you're going to come back and you're going to ask her what her needs are, right? Because we know that conflict comes from unmet needs. And when the time is right, you can take space to communicate your unmet needs as well. You can ask that question, what does it look like for us to come back together and make things right? Honey, what do you need from me? And instead of using verbiage like, you always do blank, or you made me blank, use language like, I feel like, when this was said, this is how I felt. Don't attack. Don't get defensive. Another framework I've spoken about often on this podcast is the story I'm telling myself. And you can use this in the context of conflict, because usually when your wife says something to you, you're hearing her words, but you're filtering it through your insecurity or your fear or your anxiety or your anger, whatever it is. And your mind actually twists her words to mean something they don't. And so when she says something that triggers you and when you say blank, I'm telling myself the story that I am blank. Is that story true? So for example, if she says, all you do is work, right? Or you're never home with us and the kids. You might say, when you say that I'm never home with the kids and all I do is work, I'm telling myself the story that I'm a bad father and that I don't love my family. Is that story true? And I promise you, man, she's going to be like, no, that's not what I meant at all. What I mean is, we love having you around. You add so much to this family. I just want to spend more time with you. And you're like, oh, well, that's different than what I was hearing in my head. All right. It's a great way to hear the true meaning behind her words and to diffuse conflict before it gets too far. This is what I'm talking about when we talk about emotional leadership, right? Sometimes when I say it's a man's responsibility to lead his home, people get a little snaky, they get a little uncomfortable. Well, here's the thing. A good leader leads his team in the workplace, for example, right? He can lead his team, his staff members through storms. A good leader is the anchor of the company. He is responsible to show them the path and also to take ownership and make sure that there's no conflict or no tension on the team or in the team. Here's the thing. You are the leader in your relationship. And this is no different. Whether it's you and your wife or you're leading your children emotionally, realistically, she is craving for you to lead through this. So the truth here is healing is your responsibility. Step into that emotional leadership. You can, and let's stop using the excuse of like, well, I'm just a guy. I don't know how to do that. All right, that might have worked 50 years ago, but that's no longer an excuse. There are way too many resources and tools at your disposal, aka my podcast and the countless others, okay? The last step is T. The step number 5, transform it. Here's where we're going to lead differently. Just talked about this, right? Lead first. I want you to reframe conflict. She's my teammate, not my opponent. Because the thing is men who fight well win at home. And like I said, we can blame our wiring. Well, we weren't raised this way. Our family didn't say this. My dad didn't tell me he loved me. Whatever. I never heard my dad apologize. That's why I can't apologize. Stop making those excuses. All right? Your wiring explains you, but it doesn't excuse you. So the last question for you is this. Which fire starter shows up most for you in your relationship? Is it a lack of respect or a lack of love? Is it a clash of core values? Is it a family of origins clash? Is it attachment styles? Is it love languages and a clash of those? But here's the thing. Awareness is step 1. All right. These tools will help you understand the fight behind the fight. Because like I said in the beginning of the episode, it's not about the dishwasher. It's not about the toys, the toy cars on the floor. It's not about the words that I usually said. It's about the unmet need that isn't being communicated. And I guarantee you can trace it down to one of those 5 things. So listen, here is your homework. You didn't think you're getting homework this week, but let's go, baby. I want you to identify one recurring conflict this week. We all got them. All right, we all got them. Is what it is. So don't be arrogant enough to think like, oh, that's not us. We don't have conflict. Well, if you don't have conflict, then that's a whole nother issue in itself. And then you're going to ask yourself, which fire starter is driving that conflict? And hey, just to come full circle, if you want to build connection before the conflict even happens, and that's going to actually mitigate more conflict in the future, if you want a tool that's going to mitigate all that, then I want you to grab the Spark Starter Kit today that I mentioned at the beginning of the show, because I'm telling you, if you are daily depositing into your wife, daily sending her messages of appreciation or gratitude or acknowledgement, and you're regularly taking her out on a date night, or you're regularly engaging her in conversation, or you understand how to reset the romance in your relationship, I tell you what, 80% of these fights aren't even going to happen. So again, go to sparkstarterkit.com to grab your kit, or hit the link in the show notes below to get your copy today. All right, bring that fire back tonight. No joke, dude. It's that simple. So listen, as we wrap up our time together, remember, you're not fighting each other. You're fighting patterns you inherited, patterns you've learned, and therefore there are patterns that you can unlearn, okay? So lead with love, lead with courage, lead with clarity, and as always, I'm in your corner. We'll see you next week. Thank you for tuning into the Dad Nation podcast today. Listen, if today's conversation challenged you, if it encouraged you or helped you level up in any area of your life, would you do me a favor? Take 60 seconds to rate and review the show on whatever platform you're listening on. This helps us reach more men who need to hear this message. And if you haven't already done so, subscribe to the Dad Nation YouTube channel, where you're going to find full episodes, clips, and exclusive content designed to help you win at home just like you do at work. All right, remember, your family does not need perfection. They need your presence. Your leadership matters. So keep showing up, keep leveling up, and never forget, when the dad gets better, the whole family wins. We'll see you next time.